Hello and welcome to the Packer Franchise Podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today I am here with a special guest. He's a fan of the Minnesota Vikings, and he runs an Instagram page called at The.Daily.Skol, and we are happy to have him on here today. So if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up? The podcast. I'm Nick Lawler. I run the at The.Daily.Skol Instagram page, and I'm excited to talk some football today.
Awesome. And now, before we get started, like I said, I really appreciate you hopping on the show. Like I said, we were talking before the show even started. It's just real nice to talk to fans of other teams too, especially a rival fan, because as many NFL fans assume, the rivals, don't have a chit chat and all that stuff. But it's just real nice to have a sit down and talk. But football is back. Thank God. It's been a very, very long off season. I mean, it flew by for some people, but with all the COVID and all these off season changes with the COVID policies, it's just glad to have football back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been too long of a wait. I know I'm itching to watch some football. I'm excited to see, we got two really great teams coming at it this Sunday. I know I'm going to be tuning into the Thursday night football game just because, I can't take not having football anymore. So, it should be a great weekend.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely going to be a great weekend, too. Not just for NFL football, but, college is coming back. I was back last weekend, but college and most of these young kids across the country with high school football, too. So, it's just great to have a sport, so beloved back. But, yeah, so we're going to get talking about football right now. The first topic I would like to discuss with you, and if you want to take this right away too, first is the offseason recaps. If you want to talk about your team and how you feel, what was the biggest offseason move that you felt was important to your team?
So I think the biggest, most impactful move this offseason, a week ago, I would have told you it was, the acquisition of Jeff Gladney and Cameron Densler in the draft. Getting two great cornerbacks out of college. They both, were pretty dominant on their teams throughout their college careers. Last week we made a big trade. We pulled in, Yannick Ngakoue, and I really think his impact is going to be huge this year. And I think he's just an extremely talented player, and he's going to put a whole new level to our pass rush. So I definitely think he's probably the biggest impact and the biggest factor on that defense right now coming in from this offseason.
Yeah, and earlier in the offseason too, you lost Everson Griffin, definitely a Pro Bowl defensive end and definitely one of the best in recent Vikings history. And they acquire a guy like Yannick Ngakoue. It's pretty much like you didn't really lose anybody. So, in fact, you probably gained a little better player than him. I'm not saying Everson Griffin's a bad player. He's definitely a tremendous player, but I think Ngakoue can definitely improve your defensive line a bit. But the biggest, Green Bay's offseason recap, for me personally, I felt the biggest offseason recap for our team could be drafting either A.J. Dillon or I'm going to pronounce the name, the tight end from Cincinnati. I'm not going to try because I'm going to mispronounce it. Yeah, DeGuara. I felt like DeGuara's a big need for the tight end position because we lost Jimmy Graham, and I know Robert Tonyan's going to get the nod at the starting tight end because, he's definitely been working his tail off. He definitely, should. But I think DeGuara, it just, watching his highlights and just reading information about him, it just seemed like I get a Travis Kelce kind of vibe. I'm not saying he's the next Travis Kelce, but you just look at him, you just look at his athleticism and all that. I just get like a Travis Kelce vibe from him. A.J. Dillon. Now listen, everyone hated this pick back in April. Everyone hated this pick. Why did Brian draft a running back? We had Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams and all them. I think with A.J. Dillon, I feel like Brian Gutekunst saw the potential A.J. Dillon had, and with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams contracts being up, I feel like Aaron Jones might stay. Jamal Williams, he might not stay. So that's why I feel like they drafted A.J. Dillon because And like Aaron Rodgers said in the Pat McAfee show, you need a 2 running back league to be successful. You need to have a dynamic duo running back. That's why the Saints in 2017 and 18 were successful with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. So I feel like they drafted A.J. Dillon because, I mean, he is explosive running back. I mean, he had like 1,800 yards total last year in college. I mean, I did a top 5 Packer players to look forward to, and I felt like those 2 guys were the biggest importance offseason recaps. I would say Devin Funchess because it's another veteran wide receiver, but he optioned out for coronavirus. I mean, not going to bash him for his decision because obviously, you know, he wants. I mean, it's a respectful decision, so I'm not going to bash him for that. But yeah, I feel like A.J. Dillon and DeGaro's the 2 biggest offseason recaps. Some may say Kirksey, but we'll see.
Absolutely, and especially on the lines of opt-outs, Michael Pierce would have been a huge addition to the interior of the Vikings D-line this year. Unfortunately, he opted out. Got to respect their decision, as you said. They're watching out for their health, and no one can really fault them for that. It is unfortunate not to be able to see him in uniform for the Vikings this year, but hopefully next year and going forward after that, it's going to be really productive on the D-line for them. But, with him opting out, I do feel pretty confident in Ngakoue being the standout acquisition for the Vikings this offseason.
Oh, yeah. And, with these players opting out, and, like we always say, we respect their decision because their health's more important than, playing a game. I mean, that's what it should be. Your health's the most important thing. I know I'm kind of going a little off topic, but it's incredible how many players are actually opting out, and that will show a big impact. I mean, especially for a team like the Patriots with, like, Dante Hightower and option out, and, I mean, there was another big player that option out. I forget who it was, but yeah, you got all these teams, and that could really shape things up in, like the AFC East.
Yeah.
Because Dante Hightower's, yeah.
I was shocked initially, how many players actually did decide to go through it, like with it, like you said. I don't know exactly what I was expecting when, they made it apparent that they were going to give players the option to opt out. But I definitely wasn't expecting just the sheer volume of players like they did.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the overall scheme of things, it really wasn't a large percent of players. But, it's just astounding to me, looking back at it now, just how many players did choose to take that option.
Oh, yes.
And it definitely is going to have an impact on the season. I think this season, a lot of things that have happened recently in the world are going to have a big impact on this season, which is one of the reasons I think, the return to football is just so important right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think it is good to get our minds off of things. And so it's huge right now that football is coming back.
Oh, yeah, and rightfully so. And speaking of impact, that's actually a nice topic. The biggest thing coming to this season is no fans. Some stadiums are doing some teams are doing with no fans, some are doing with partial fans, and for this upcoming game, there will be no fans in the stadium, and so it's basically like a neutral site for both teams. There's really no home field advantage to it, which is huge for the away team. And I just wanted to hear your opinion on, this whole no fans in the stadium. How would that impact both teams?
Well, obviously, as you mentioned, it is going to make a huge impact. It's unfortunate that the no fans is going to be implemented while the Vikings have the home field advantage, quote unquote. I would like to see a rule implementation for divisional games, where if one of the games was had to have made with no fans, then the opposing game, where it's at the alternate team site, should have to follow the same lines, just to try to keep a level of fairness there. Obviously, I know that's a long shot. It's probably not going to, amount to anything, but I do think it would keep that fairness as far as going forward in the season, because obviously the Vikings won't be able to capitalize on that home field advantage like they should be able to with fans. And by the time that they travel to Lambeau later in the season, who knows? Fans might be back in the stands. So it's unfortunate, but but it's something that not just the Vikings and the Packers matchup has to deal with. It is a league-wide thing, like you said. So it's going to be an issue that everyone's just going to have to fight through this year, and hopefully it doesn't have much of an impact, as far as a league-wide point, but it might, it probably will, and so we'll just have to kind of see what that really entails. If it, causes teams to come out a little bit slower, it's going to be something we're going to catch on to really quick, and that's going to kind of be how you game plan around that from the future. So we'll really see how that works out.
Oh yeah, and I mean, with Green Bay, they're doing their first 2 home games with no fans, which they'll play the Detroit Lions and the Atlanta Falcons. Which, I mean, on paper, it don't seem like the home field advantage was a must need at the time, but Detroit's always a tough game, but yeah. But well, that's another story. We're talking about the Vikings Packers game, but yeah. So pretty much talked about right now the offseason recaps, crazy offseason recaps, and the impact with no fans. And now we get talking about the X factors in this game, and who do you believe the biggest X factor in this game that can give the Vikings the best chance to win?
Unfortunately, we got the news this morning that Danielle Hunter would be placed on IR after practice. So he's going to be out for at least 3 weeks, hopefully no more, but he is going to miss the Vikings-Packers matchup. So that, to me, that's telling me that the X factor this game is going to be Efiti Odenigbo. He wasn't exactly thrilled with the acquisition of Yannick Ngakoue. Nothing against Ngakoue, nothing against Efiti, but Efiti, he thought he had a starting role. He worked very, very hard for a starting role. You could see that with everything he's done this offseason, the offseason before that. He has definitely been building himself up to peak this season. And it sucks not being able to have Danielle Hunter there. It does. And it's going to impact the game. But I feel confident in the fact that Efiti's hungry enough to go out and make a big-time impact in this game. So I really do think he's going to be our X factor. If he plays like he says he will, if he plays like
he'll probably get a few snaps,
then, I think it'll have a big impact on the game.
Yeah, and I mean, just because he's not starting doesn't mean he'll still get a few snaps, because Ngakoue will probably be tired, especially with that Packers offense. But speaking of Packers offense, I think my biggest X factor in this game is honestly Marquee Valdes-Scantling. I've heard all off training camp that he's having one of the best training camps, and that would be great for Green Bay, especially since they need a reliable guy on the second receiving end other than Devontae Adams, which I'll get pressure off him. And it's okay, we've heard all these rumors about you having your best camp and how you're just getting your name out there, rising up as receivers. So time to prove against a real good defense with pretty good cornerbacks and on the road too. So, well, I mean, I've always liked Marquee Valdes-Scantling. I've always thought he was a very decent receiver, and I just can't wait to see how he plays this Sunday. Hopefully he can play really well. Hopefully probably a 90-yard, 1-touchdown day.
Absolutely. And the thing about Marquez there is that he's shown flashes of just that pure athleticism that he has, where he's able to take over cornerbacks on a deep route.
Oh, yeah.
And, he definitely has that ability. He has the ability to pull off a huge play at any point. His biggest issue has always been consistency. So if he's gotten over that mind part of the game where he's able to, get focused in and dialed in completely, he can definitely, evolve into that good number 2 receiver, that receiver that's going to take the pressure off Devontae Adams, a deep threat kind of guy. So he does have the potential there.
Yeah, and, it's always been Allen Lazard last season. I mean, Allen Lazard is a very reliable receiver, but, I mean, we've already kind of figured Allen Lazard is a playmaker, so that's why I kind of lean towards MVS as the X factor in this game. People were kind of shocked they didn't really say Robert Tonyan.
And Tonyan would be a good pick too.
New tight end, starting tight end. Nobody really knows about him.
And Rodgers doesn't mind having a solid option there at the tight end position to, have some quick dump passes off to, a good safety valve. So Tanyan, if he could find some weak spots in the zones, he could have a solid game as well.
Yeah, man. We'll see what happens. But alrighty, we got under the radar player next on our topics. So pretty much a player that not many people really expect to kind of like go ahead in this game, but can you like, I'm trying to say a player that you feel like's under the radar but should have an explosive game. I mean, he's kind of like an X factor, but not really.
Absolutely. So one player I think right now that's under a lot of people's radars, and I do think he could have a very successful game, is Olabisi Johnson. He's, we drafted Justin Jefferson this offseason, and everyone assumed Justin Jefferson would immediately take over the number 2 role. Olabisi Johnson had something to say about that, and, he worked his ass off in camp, and here, he comes through, and, he wins the outside receiving job.
Mm-hmm.
Across from Adam Thielen, which is a huge, huge step, coming from a 7th-round rookie last year. He stuck on the roster last year as the 4th wide receiver. He showed some impressive moments, and now he's starting opposite of Adam Thielen in an offense where, Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen have coexisted and put up huge numbers together. Now, while I do fully expect Justin Jefferson to really take stride at some point this season and show, the explosiveness that made him a first-round pick, I do think in the early games of the season, like this Week 1 matchup with Green Bay, BC could shine, I think. He's got a really silky route running, and I think he's got great hands. And so I think if he can get the right matchup against these Packers corners, he can work his way into a good game. I'm not saying 60, 75 yards are out of the question here, and I do know that we're a run-first team, so I think that's a big accomplishment, especially for a number 2 receiver in our offense.
Yeah, and, you made a valid point, especially with, big game against Green Bay, and team that sometimes, like, the defense shows some signs, and sometimes they'll break down, so, I mean, we'll see what happens. But my under the radar player, and I've been kind of thinking about it a good bit while you were talking about your player. I'm going to go, and I'm going to say the newly acquired tackle, Rick Wagner. I feel like, with our offensive line with Brian Bulaga out and all that, I'm pretty sure Rick Wagner is going to get that side of the field. I'm not sure. But, I mean, if he does, I'm assuming he's going to play because we signed him in offseason for a reason. The former Detroit Lion tackle. Because, especially against those defensive end rushers, and I don't know, just offensive linemen don't get much praise that they should be.
So absolutely, that's so true.
Yes,
They always get undervalued and underappreciated.
And I feel like Rick Wagner, being a former, I didn't really do much research on him. I should have before I did this podcast, but I feel like division game against a solid defensive front, who knows who he's going to be matched up against, is Rodgers going to be more comfortable in a pocket with him there? I mean, Brian Bulaga is pretty hard to replace.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you take one of the best right tackles in the game and you lose him in free agency, obviously there's going to be some kind of drop-off there. The big question in this game is how much. How much of a drop-off can Rodgers take?
And I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, continue.
Oh, no, I was going to say, and I mean, unfortunately, I posted my story when Darnell Hunter got hurt. I said, I know some people are, glad he's not playing, give Green Bay a chance, but I really want Hunter to play. But with Hunter being out and Everson Griffin, and I'm pretty sure Ngakwe is going to be on the left side of the ball, Rick Wagner won't have to face against those explosive defensive end players. Yeah. So, I mean, that helps a lot for him, too, to get it just a thing. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure he played against Hunter and Everson Griffin last year, too, when he was in the league, because he was on the Lions, so he played him twice a year.
Right.
So, I mean...
Yeah, he's definitely got a bit of continuity there and facing some some similar players and players that he's known before, so they're very familiar. But it looks like he might get the matchup against Afidi initially. They might switch off at some point for some scheme work with Ngakwe, which could be, I think, a little bit of a challenge for him. But overall, if he can hold his ground, that's going to be huge because when Rodgers stays off the ground, Rodgers, has that capacity to just completely take over games.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the big key here is watching our D-line against the Packers' offensive line. So whoever wins that matchup, and like you said, I think linemen get underappreciated all the time.
Not just with the passing game, too, but with the running game. Like Aaron Jones, Aaron Jones had a great season, but with no line blocking, I mean, Aaron Jones can go for like 150 yards if that O-line gives him great holes.
Absolutely. So there's such a big part in the offensive gameplay, and they definitely don't get enough credit. So I'm glad you brought up an offensive lineman there because any lineman out there listening, we feel you.
I'm pretty shocked you didn't mention any of your offensive linemen because, I mean, Green Bay's defensive front, I mean, it's pretty solid, especially with Kenny Clark getting that extension. Because, I mean, if Kirk gets protection, Kirk can be a real good quarterback.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I didn't mention anybody from offensive line is one, we have Riley Reef. We know who Riley Reef is. He's not going to surprise anybody. He's not going to let anybody down. You know exactly what he's going to do, exactly what he's capable of. So I think he's just kind of in that category. Brian O'Neill, who I think is a phenomenal talent, a right tackle. I don't think he needs any explanation as to how good he is. I think he's one of the rising stars in the offensive line in the NFL. The real problem is with our guards.
Yeah.
And until I have any more confidence and information about how our guards are holding up, I don't really want to put myself out there as putting my faith into them because I don't really know what we're rolling out with. I know we've got Pat Elflin and Dakota Dozier starting. What are we going to see from those guys? So after week one, I'll have a little more clarity on that situation. I got my fingers crossed. I'm hoping. I really am. I'm trying to go in with the best thoughts and the most positive attitude. But at the same time, as a football fan, you've got to be real with yourself sometimes. The guard position's been rough for us at some times. So, hopefully that offensive line can be that X factor, and I can look back on this and say, I should have picked Pat Elflin to be our X factor. So I'm hoping I'm wrong there. I'm hoping that I have to come back and say that. But our offensive line, I have the exact right amount of hope for them that I need to right now.
Yeah. And that's a great point you brought up, too. I mean, and the Vikings' offensive line has definitely been a big issue with them. I mean, they've improved last year, but years before that, they've definitely had an issue, especially 2016 with, Sam Bradford, a quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah. But, okay, so biggest question tonight, who wins and why?
I feel like this is a little bit of a contradictory question because I know who you're going to say is winning.
And I know who you're going to say is going to win.
I got to go with my team. I think every week you got to go with the idea that your team's going to win. So I'm going with my team. I'm going with the Vikings. I do think it's going to be a tight game. I think the loss of Danielle Hunter is going to hurt. I think Kenny Clark's going to have a good game against our interior offensive line. I like the cornerback and wide receiver matchups on both teams. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be interesting. I'm going to take us in a 27-20. We'll say 27-20 victory.
Okay. I actually made a schedule prediction video a few months back, and I actually predicted a loss for this team because, US Bank Stadium, I told everyone, in my opinion, it's definitely a tough stadium to play in.
Absolutely.
I feel like it should definitely be like a top 3 stadium to play in with Seattle and New Orleans up there. But, as we are getting closer and closer to the season, and unfortunately injuries happen, you have to play these injuries in roll now with, Hunter gone. I feel like Green Bay's offense could be... I'm going to say Green Bay wins in a tight game too. I'm going to say I don't feel like it's going to be high scoring. I feel like it's going to be more like a defensive grudge match type game. Because, I mean, both defenses have potential to be top 10 defenses. We have offenses that could potentially be top 10 offenses.
Absolutely.
But I feel like this game is going to lean more towards I'm going to say like a 16-10 type game.
Which sometimes are my favorite games to watch. I know a lot of people love the high-scoring games, but there's something to be said about the beauty in a hard-fought defensive game. So no matter what turns out, and I know this is an awful thing for me to say, but I'm just excited to watch football. With a week 1 matchup, Neil Hunter's out. I don't particularly care a whole lot who wins.
I mean, luckily it's a 3-week recovery,
absolutely, though. Yeah, so hopefully we'll see him again soon. He'll have something to say. I think it's Houston in week 4, and so that'll be a big return for us. But I'm just excited to watch football. Whoever wins, I know it's going to be a great matchup. It always is between these two teams. So I'm definitely looking forward to this Sunday.
Me too. And, like I said, it's great to have football back. And honestly, I know it's kind of a little bit extra on this podcast, but I did thought about doing like week 1 predictions. I mean, and you honestly sound like you're very intelligent when it comes to football and sports. I mean,
I know a thing or two.
I mean, yeah, and we talked before, like we both broadcast sports. I mean, yeah, he's an announcer.
More or less, yes.
But yeah, so tomorrow night, but a little bonus pick. Who you got to win in that game tomorrow?
Well, I got to go with the Chiefs. I think it's hard to pick against reigning Super Bowl champions right now. By no stretch of the imagination are the Texans a bad team. I question their management at times, but I'm a big fan in David Johnson and their running back. I love Deshaun Watson. I think he's got the goods. They still have a solid receiving core even after shipping off Hopkins. They're a great team.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely are. And I think this is going to be one of those games that I mentioned earlier. It's going to be a fireworks game. There's going to be a lot of points. It's going to happen really quickly. There's going to be fancy plays. There's going to be trick plays. There's going to be quick plays. Everything is going to be fancy about this game. And so I think it's going to be the exact opposite of what you see in a Packers-Vikings game. But I'm definitely going to go with the Chiefs, and I think they're going to win by, I'll say, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And, I know he's mentioned the Texans receiving core is pretty good. I mean, it did pick up Randall Cobb this offseason, which, I mean, as a Packer fan, Randall Cobb has really not been the same ever since, honestly, ever since Jordy Nelson tore his ACL when he had the number 1 receiver role. He's better. He's better as a 2 guy. So, I mean, he could watch him go for like 120 yards and 4 touchdowns tomorrow. But, I mean, I think Chiefs easily can win this. David Johnson, like, he was a beast, but I feel like David Johnson is not the same guy anymore. And obviously Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense is still intact. So, I mean, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I mean, it's going to be a high-scoring game, like you said, because Texans are still not a bad team. Texans are still the front runners to win that division, maybe with the Colts behind them a little bit. But I'm going to say the Chiefs can win 41-24.
All right. A little bit more of a 3-possession game there, which is definitely possible. Things can get out of hand really quickly with the Chiefs.
Oh, yeah. And we saw how Patrick Mahomes did in that second quarter against the Texans last year in the playoffs. I mean, he can turn a game like that. So, I mean,
you never count that man out of a football game.
No. Best quarterback in football right now.
Best talent in football.
Yeah. Best quarterback, too, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I still love Rodgers. Rodgers is still top 5, but and in today's age, yeah, it's Mahomes. But yeah,
absolutely.
That's pretty much the podcast. I'd like to thank the The.Daily.Skol for coming on and talking football. I mean, it's great to have football back again, and hopefully, a healthy season for both our teams, and
fingers crossed.
Yeah, and hopefully our predictions are correct. I mean, I would not be mad if it was an offensive shootout, but we'll see where it goes. So,
Absolutely.
thanks again for being on the show, and we'll catch you again soon. And good luck to your Vikings this season.
Sounds good. Good luck to the Packers as well.
Yep. Alrighty. Thank you, and thank you everybody. Have a good night. Go Pack, go.